So good to have you here. I'm Ron Orr, Minister of Culture for the province of Alberta, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to St. Vladimir's Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And I'm pleased to be here today with a number of important individuals, Premier Kenny, and this will actually be our speaking order as well. Then Olександр Данилейко, Consul General of Ukraine from Edmonton, and then Pawlo Ґрод, President of the Ukrainian World Congress. Then we're pleased to also have retired General Rick Hillier here, Chairman of the Ukrainian World Congress Strategic Advisory Council. He will share with us, and Orisia Бойчук, of the President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, will share. And I just also want to acknowledge the ever supportive Ukrainian Minister Shandro, who's also here as well. So much, thank you for being here today with us. So today we have an important announcement that reaffirms and renews Alberta's support for the people of Ukraine and the country of Ukraine. So I am pleased to invite the Premier to expound on the details of that for you. So Premier, please.
Дякую. Thank you very much, Minister Orr. Thank you, Father Patrick, for welcoming us to St. Vladimir's and for opening us in prayer. And distinguished guests, fellow Canadians, and those new in our midst from Ukraine. I just met Irina, who arrived here, I think, 3 months ago from Ivano-Frankivsk, and Dmitry, who came just a few months ago from Donetsk. Through you, to your families, we want to welcome you, and we hope that you are receiving a warm Canadian welcome, as we are so grateful to be able to offer Canada's protection to you, given the crisis in your homeland. This morning I began at 7 a.m. meeting with Governor Onyszczuk of the Oblast of Ivano-Frankivsk to sign a renewed Alberta Ivano-Frankivsk Friendship Agreement. In 2004, the Oblast and the province signed a partnership agreement to recognize each other as sister provinces, and I'm pleased to say that we just renewed that agreement this morning. And importantly, have expanded it specifically to include cooperation in the area of energy, Alberta being one of the world's energy superpowers, with the 3rd largest global oil and 4th largest natural gas reserves and huge technical competence. I expressed to the Governor Alberta's deep solidarity with the people of Ukraine during the crisis of Putin's invasion, but also that our commitment would be there long term, and that we, as Albertans, will be eager to participate in the rebuilding of Ukraine following this war. Once the Ukrainians have successfully pushed every Russian soldier out of sovereign Ukrainian territory, Alberta and Canada must be there. Must be there in the huge work of reconstruction, of renewal, and a critical part of that, of course, will be strengthening Ukrainian energy security and independence, an issue that has become rather obviously urgent, given Russian energy imperialism and Putin's effort to successfully weaponize Russian energy throughout Europe and around the world. So it was a pleasure to begin today with that renewal of our particularly close friendship. Of course, for a province that has nearly 400,000 Albertans who boast some Ukrainian heritage. I was just saying, Minister Shandro, our Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, the Shandro family was one of the very first to come here from Galicia in the, from Lviv at the beginning of the last century. And in fact, his great-uncle was the first person of Ukrainian origin elected to any public office in North America. And that family alone represents the deep and abiding human, cultural ties which continue to this day, as you see in this magnificent church. That is why I believe Albertans have had a special closeness to Ukrainians during the crisis of the past 7 months. As we have seen Putin not begin his invasion of Ukraine, but continue the invasion that began in 2014. in eastern Ukraine and in Crimea with its occupation. I was very proud as Canada's Minister of National Defence at that time to deploy Canada's military to Operation Unifier to provide world-class technical training at a NATO standard for the Ukrainian military, which has played a very important role in the modernization of Ukraine's armed forces and the remarkable success that they have been having against all of the odds on the battlefield because of their brilliant young officer corps, their flexibility, and the support that they've received from other Western countries. We are all astonished, and I am inspired to see the remarkable bravery, but also the operational effectiveness of the Ukrainian armed forces and the people who stand behind them. At that time, I was also proud to provide other forms of assistance to the Ukrainian military, including high-resolution real-time satellite imagery, which President Poroshenko, former President Poroshenko, told us was critically important in defending the Donbass in that conflict in 2015. But of course, what we've witnessed over the past 7 months has astonished, shocked us all. We've seen the unmitigated violence, the pure evil coming from the heart of Vladimir Putin to indiscriminately attack people that he calls his brothers in a neighboring Slavic nation whose history is inextricably connected to that of Russia, and yet treating Ukraine not as a friend and as a neighbor, but treating Ukraine as a colony to be destroyed. It is hard for us to understand this kind of military aggression and indiscriminate violence, which the likes of which we have not seen at this scale since the Second World War. That is why from the beginning of the conflict, Alberta's government has sought to do what we can to demonstrate concretely our solidarity with the people of Ukraine in the defense of their sovereignty, their democracy, and their right to self-determination. That's why we have provided support both to the Ukrainian Canadian Congress in their effort to provide humanitarian relief, and I want to thank Orisia Бойчук and the UCC Alberta chapter for their tremendous support. As well, we provided $5 million of funding to the World Ukrainian Congress and their Stand With Ukraine campaign, the first installment of which went to support non-lethal military equipment like helmets and night vision goggles and other equipment to provide support to the Territorial Defense Force, which would be our equivalent of the militia, who have been playing a critical role in support of the military. Now, 6 months have passed since we made those announcements. And let me just say in context here that it's true, provincial governments in Canada do not have primary responsibility for international development or, of course, foreign policy. But there have to be exceptions to every rule. And Alberta's relationship with Ukraine truly is exceptional. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is historically exceptional. So this requires an exceptional response, which is why I'm pleased to announce today that Alberta is providing another $10 million of support to the Ukrainian World Congress for the Stand With Ukraine campaign, specifically to purchase medical and related equipment to help save lives of the defenders of Ukraine during the difficult months to come in this conflict. This will provide, as I say, non-lethal supplies for the Territorial Defense Forces, including individual first aid kits and medical supplies, sleeping bags and winter clothing, diesel generators, ambulances, and communications and operating expenses. We're very confident of our partnership with the Ukrainian World Congress and their Unite with Ukraine campaign. This is a decades-old, credible international organization headed by a highly respected Canadian, Pavlo Ґрод, who will follow me at the podium. And I'm so impressed that they've engaged a world-class advisory board to help direct their aid efforts chaired by none other than Canada's former Chief of Defence Staff, Lieutenant General retired Rick Hillier, who will also speak. And he has assembled a remarkable group of some of the world's most highly respected former military commanders. And so we are confident that every one of these Alberta tax dollars will be put to maximum good use to help save lives. You know, I'm in my last phase as Alberta's Premier, and I honestly could not in conscience end my term in office without taking this additional step to offer concrete support. Because if the solidarity that we showed earlier is meaningful, we all of us in the civilized world must be in this for the long haul. We cannot simply utter platitudes of solidarity with Ukraine and token support. Early support was necessary, but it's not sufficient. As we see the Ukrainian forces in their effective counteroffensive, both in the Donbass and in southern Ukraine, and yet we see Putin's absurd mobilization and now reckless threats of nuclear attacks. We know that Ukraine and its people are in this for the long haul, and we must be there with them. I will be taking today's announcement to my fellow premiers over the next day to encourage them to follow Alberta's example. We appreciate, of course, the federal government has primary responsibility for, under our Constitution. And I do believe, as a former Minister of Defense, that there is more that they can do. I'm sure General Hillier can speak to that. But we are doing, with these together with the spring's announcements, this now comes to $23 million, Alberta's contribution to Ukrainian military and humanitarian relief, which is orders of magnitude more than any other province, or more than we have provided in any other historical situation. That, once again, is, I think, a meaningful reflection of the depth of our commitment to the people of Ukraine. And so with that, I will now invite who's next, Ron? All right, well, I'll hand it over back to our MC, Minister of Culture, who's responsible for this contribution. But once again, Alberta is proud to play this role, and I will be encouraging fellow premiers to follow our lead. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
So, thank you so much, Premier, that this funding has been approved and will be made available through the Ministry of Culture. I will now invite Consul General of Ukraine, Olександр Данилейко, to the podium here. I've had the opportunity to work with him quite a few times over the last few years, and so please welcome Consul General Данилейко.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Premier Джейсона Кенні, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here together with you with this great announcement of another great help from province of Alberta to Ukraine. First of all, as the official representative of Ukraine, Consul General of Ukraine here in Alberta, I would like to thank you, Premier Kenney, personally, and all the government of Alberta and all Albertans for so generous donations and so needed help you provided for Ukraine, for Ukrainians. Before, you said absolutely right. This war is long-standing, and we need support more and more to fight the Russian aggression, to defeat them. And we will do, for sure, with your support. Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, this fight not only for our land, this fight is for our survival, for our existence as a nation. Putin does not want to stop the war and escalates the situation to the highest possible level, trying to annex Ukrainian territory, called the mobilization, and the threatening the whole world with the nuclear attack. So we have to stop him. We have actually no choice. As the Secretary of State Blinken recently said at the UN Security Council high-level meeting, he said, if Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. And it is absolutely true. Russians are trying to destroy Ukraine completely, to eliminate Ukrainian people as a nation, to eliminate Ukrainian culture, language, our heritage and history. They want to take our past and future away from us, making our speechless slaves of the bloody Russian Empire. They are bombing our peaceful cities, destroying critical civil infrastructure, hospitals, schools, killing innocent civilians, women, children. According to the UN Human Rights Office, there are more than 15,000 civilian casualties in Ukraine already. More than 6,000 civilians are killed and 9,000 injured. Russians already killed 416 Ukrainian children and injured 784. Unfortunately, this is not the whole picture. Real casualties are much higher. Russians are trying to hide their atrocities. Almost every day we find mass graves of civilians in the deoccupied territories. Many bodies show traces of abuse and torture. This state terrorism, this genocide against Ukrainian people must be stopped, and all those guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity must be brought to justice. Putin's war can be stopped only by joint efforts of the entire democratic world. Ukrainians are now on the front line of this battle with evil. But we are fighting not only for our country. We are also fighting for the democratic and human values that we all share, for peace and stability in the whole world. If we let Putin win, he will go further. The entire world's security system will collapse, and we will move from the rule of law to the rule of force. You see now how strong and brave Ukrainians are. We are defeating Russia's so-called secondary army in the world on the battlefields. We are liberating more and more Ukrainian territories, but unfortunately, Russia still has plenty of resources to continue this bloody war. So, we desperately need the support from our friends and partners. We need military assistance as much as we need humanitarian support for millions of civil Ukrainians who are suffering from the Russian aggression. And here I would like to thank again Government of Alberta, Premier Джейсона Кенні, all Albertans, our Canadian-Ukrainian organizations, Ukrainian World Congress, Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Alberta Provincial Councils, for all your work since the very beginning of the war, for all your support and very needed aid you provide to Ukraine and to Ukrainians fighting for their independence. And I had several meetings with the Premier Kenney since the war beginning, and Premier Kenney always was supporting Ukraine, was always interested in what's going on in Ukraine and how the government of Alberta can help Ukraine more. And we even packed some humanitarian supply together with the Premier to send critical firefighter and rescue equipment to Ukraine, which was used to rescue people from the wreckages after the Russian bombing. Thank you very much, Premier. Thank you very much, Alberta. Thank you very much, all Albertans, for this. Thank you. So please keep supporting Ukraine, because as the Premier said, we will need support more and more. And together with your support, we will win our common victory soon, and we'll celebrate it. Thank you very much, Alberta. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you so much, Consul General. And Albertans are proud to stand in support of the people of Ukraine through this very, very difficult time. I'd now like to invite Pawlo Ґрод, President of the Ukrainian World Congress, to the podium. So please share with us. Thank you, sir.
Dear Premier Kenney, Ministers, Consul General, General Hillier, Orisia Бойчуk, President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta. My name is Pawlo Ґрод, and I'm President of the Ukrainian World Congress. which is an international NGO with over 55 years of history, representing the interests of Ukrainian communities in over 60 countries around the world. I am including the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, which is one of our key constituent member organizations in Canada. I'm very grateful to be here today in Alberta for this significant announcement of support to the people of Ukraine, who have for the past 7 months been bravely defending their country from Russia's murderous full-scale invasion. We are grateful to Albertans who have generously opened their homes, their schools, and their businesses to Ukrainian refugees, some of whom are with us here today. You've heard from them their heart-wrenching stories of their experiences of the atrocities and mass destructions being committed by Russia's army of criminals and marauders. We also heard their cries to help provide protective equipment to their sons and daughters, husbands, brothers, and fathers who are today defending Ukraine so that they will one day be reunited with their families. This is the goal of the Unite with Ukraine campaign, a global appeal of the Ukrainian World Congress. At the onset of Russia's war in Ukraine, I received a call from a longtime friend, Premier Jeyson Kenney, who called and said, "Paul, this is atrocious. We need to do something. What can we do? What can Alberta do in a meaningful way to help Ukraine stop Russia's aggression?" Well, within days, the province of Alberta made an impactful contribution of $5 million of humanitarian support to the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and the Ukrainian Canadian Foundation, and another $5 million to the Ukrainian World Congress in being able to help provide protective equipment to the defenders of Ukraine. And your generous contribution has protected the lives of thousands of defenders of Ukraine, and we're extremely grateful for that. Recently, we have watched as a brave Ukrainian armed forces have been pushing back Russia's armies and liberating Ukrainian territories. Despite these gains, Ukrainians will be battling a long and difficult war throughout a very cold winter, especially as Vladimir Putin mobilizes tens of thousands of additional Russian troops to use as cannon fodder in his ideological campaign focused on destroying the Ukrainian nation and Western democracies. We must do everything possible to help the Ukrainians liberate their people from Russia's terrorist occupation. In recaptured cities like Bucha, Irpin, Izium, and many others, we have witnessed the torture, the rapes, the killings that have been inflicted by the Russian soldiers against the Ukrainian people in occupied territories. I recently visited these people and places in Ukraine with General Hillier. We heard firsthand the chilling stories of mass atrocities and saw the destruction and burial sites. We cannot stand by and allow this to continue. We must act now. The funding announced today will go a long way towards helping the defenders survive the cold winter on the front lines. The Unite with Ukraine team on the ground in Ukraine and Poland will immediately procure and deliver tactical medical supplies and training, defensive equipment, winter gear to keep them warm, and provide reconnaissance tools they need to protect against Russian attacks. As the war rages on, the needs on the ground will change. The Ukrainian World Congress team is in constant communication with the most senior levels of Ukraine's government, its armed forces, and the President's office to ensure Ukrainians are receiving the support they need most today. The successful counteroffensive by Ukraine's armed forces currently being waged on the eastern and southern fronts has demonstrated that if Ukraine continues to be properly equipped, Ukraine's soldiers and defenders will win this war. Premier Kenney, you, your government, and the people of Alberta continue to show real leadership in Canada and around the world with your deeds by continuing to provide practical and effective support to the defenders of Ukraine. You've had our backs from the beginning. When Russia first invaded and occupied Ukraine in 2014, as a senior federal cabinet minister and later Minister of Defense, you made sure the volunteers who made the first ranks of the Ukrainian army received immediate military support and training from Canada and you have continued to support the people of Ukraine in their desire to live in peace and with dignity. You have always been and continue to be a true friend of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and for that, we are forever grateful. Thank you, Premier Kенні. Thank you to the government of Alberta. Thank you to the people of Alberta. Merci, дякую. Слава Україні, слава Альберті. I would just like to ask the Vice President of the Ukrainian World Congress, my colleague, Dr. George Hutsalak, to join me here on stage or at the podium. I'd like to offer the Premier a very symbolic gift. This is a gift that was collected by our director of the Unite with Ukraine campaign, Mr. Andriy Putichny. These are fragments of a Russian Iskander M missile collected by the director of the Ukraine campaign, Andriy Putichny, at a destroyed school in Bakhmut, Donetsk Oblast in Ukraine this past July 2022. This is an example of what school children in Ukraine are coming to witness when they start the school year here in September. So Premier Kенні, this is a token, a symbol that will, I expect, continue to ensure that you maintain the drive and the commitment to support the people of Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. And also thank you, Paul, for your work that you do. His work is voluntary, but that does not mean it's unimportant. It's extremely important. And thank you for stepping up in that way to donate your time and your efforts and your knowledge and your contacts. So thank you. I next would like to say that we are honored to have retired General Rick Hillier, Chairman of the Ukrainian World Congress Strategic Advisory Council, here with us today. And I would invite the General to the podium to share his remarks, please. Thank you.
Well, Premier and ministers and ladies and gentlemen and Father Patrick, thank you for hosting us here. When you're the fourth speaker, pretty much everything has been said. But I recall the words of a father of Confederation, Premier Joey Smallwood from Newfoundland and Labrador, my home province, who said if something is worth saying once, it's worth saying 2, 3, or 4, or 5 times. So never miss that opportunity. So bearing that in mind, I just want to re-emphasize 4 points here. Number one is, Premier, I got to say thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you to the ministers and government of Alberta and to the people of Alberta for all that you have done and obviously continue to do. But I go back for Premier Kенní and say thank you for being the leader that kicked off and started Unifier to train the Ukrainian Defense Forces way back in 2014, I believe it was, and it sort of hobbled through some of the years when it came out. But if I could tell you, I don't think it's an overstatement at all that some of the successes, one of the many things that have led to the success of Ukrainian Defense Forces in their fight against this brutal invasion has been the training that their soldiers, their NCOs, their officers, their leaders received from Canadian NCOs and officers since 2014 in the tens of thousands, and that has been helpful in their success to date. And I thank you for that, sir. That's an incredible initiative, and it has had a very real impact. And I think, in fact, that Canada has a legacy there on which we can build for the future and do even more of that development of Ukraine's defense forces, and specifically their leadership, using both the Canadian Armed Forces and private companies in Canada, use all of our great potential and take that opportunity, build our legacy in the training. That would be point number one. Point number two would be, you cannot imagine the impact that this $10 million will have on the ground for young soldiers, primarily in the territorial defense forces. When I was in Ukraine, I had the opportunity to meet many of them, and they're just like us. They're farmers, they're mayors, they're businessmen and women who gave up their sort of professions, their jobs, to come out and protect their families, defend their country from a brutal invasion, from a brutal invader. And I had the opportunity to meet a father and son tank hunting team. Just think about that for a second. You know, a father and son tank hunting team. And they walked me through the area where they were in the fight of their lives on one night and took out 4 Russian T-72 tanks with an antique rocket-propelled grenade launcher, the RPG-7. One of the tanks took 21 shots to knock out. Now you think of father and son activities, things that you do together, that's not normally it, but that's what they're doing because the need is there. And this $10 million will focus primarily, certainly at the front end, on getting them the medical kit that they need to survive. And when you're a young soldier and you're going in against those tanks or against the artillery and you get wounded, you need to have certain things to, first of all, save your own life. And then you can save the life of your battle buddy. And then when the bleeding has been stopped and the breathing has been reestablished, you need to be able to get them out of that combat area and get them back to further medical treatment so they can survive and go on to live a productive life. And they need to have as soldiers, as part of the medical kit that this $10 million will buy, they need to have things like those automatic locking tourniquets. And you carry them, whether you strap it on your left leg or right leg, or left arm or right arm. If you're bleeding, you put that sucker on, you ratchet it down, it locks automatically, and even if you go unconscious, it will not loosen out and you will not bleed out and die. They need to have those tourniquets when they go into action. They need to have a thing called quick clot, that material you slap on an open wound that immediately starts to seal it, reduces the blood loss, and gives you an opportunity to get to the medical treatment that you will need to prevent your life being lost, etc. They need to have battalion medical stations, including the ambulances, defibrillators that go with that. So when you go into shock and when you go into arrest, you can actually get the treatment there and get your life back and be able to carry on and be a part of the citizens of Ukraine. And that's what this $10 million is going to help do. And you're going to be able to do that in January and February and March and the brutal cold days of winter, because you're going to be able to get some kind of clothing that will help you survive. That's what that $10 million is going to do. It's going to save the lives of those people who are protecting their families and defending their country. But secondly, what it's going to do, and I've experienced this myself in the past, the $10 million is going to be hugely effective, but the impetus and the emotion of an announcement like this, Premier, is also powerful. It is absolutely incredible. And I know that not every territorial defense soldier in Ukraine will hear about $10 million from Alberta, but you can be sure that their leaders all will know about it, and they will be reinvigorated for this long war that they are in against Russia. They will be reinvigorated to carry on the fight, knowing they've got support from right around the world. And that value certainly cannot be underestimated. And the third thing I would say, or the fourth thing I would say, is that this is an awesome example, and Premier, you alluded to it. I hope every Premier, every government, and every province in Canada, and every country around the world looks at Alberta and says, if Alberta is doing this to help the good people of Ukraine defend their democracy against this brutal invasion, then surely we must do our part also. And I look to every province across this great land. British Columbia, step up. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, step up. Ontario, Premier Kenney says that his contribution from Alberta and the people of Alberta, that's $40 million from Ontario. Almost that amount from Quebec and the Maritime provinces. Maybe you can't give as much, but you can give. So I hope that this will be an example to all of us. And you know, the federal government of Canada stepped up. We've given as a nation, I believe, some $500 million so far. I know we'll have an economic update in the coming weeks here. I hope, and just ask now, where's the next $500 million? Where's the next billion? And let's put it in places like this. Let's put it in places like that legacy of training and use the example of Alberta here as one on which we can build proudly. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, General Hillier. And true to form, as a Newfoundlander, you had no problem filling in, giving a good talk, so thank you. Next, I would like to invite, as our final speaker today, Orisia Бойчук, President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Alberta chapter, Provincial Council, sorry. I've had the opportunity to work with Orisia a number of times over the last couple of years, and I will say that there is no one who has worked harder for Ukrainians here in Alberta, which is her jurisdiction, her area, to advance the cause, to do what she can to help. So please, Orisia, come to the podium and share with us.
Thank you. Premier Kenney, Minister Shandro, General Hillier, Pavlo Ґрод, President of the World Congress, Olександр Данилейко, Consul General of Ukraine. Dear guests, it's a true pleasure to be here and be part of this funding announcement. Premier Kenney, thank you so much for your steadfast support of our community here in Alberta, and also for your direct support in Ukraine's defenders who have currently fighting for the Russian invaders. Premier Kenney, you and your government stand out among provinces, as we've talked about earlier today, for the commitment to defending democracy around the world. Ukraine is fighting for all of us here, for the values we as Albertans and Canadians hold dear, which is freedom, human rights, and sovereignty. Really, the belief in creating a better world for our children and their children. This is a fight where the choice between two sides could not be clearer, but sadly, we've seen less than unequivocal support for Ukraine from our Western countries. Everyone can issue a tweet, wear a pin, but it takes leadership and conviction, which you have done, Premier Kenney, to put your money where your mouth is. And this is what Premier Kenney has truly done. Thank you. We are very grateful for your support and your sustained continued support. Before today's announcement of $10 million, the Alberta government already had committed more than $13.5 million in support for Ukraine. This has included settlement and language services delivered across the province. It has included humanitarian aid appeal through Canada-Ukraine Foundation, humanitarian aid to Ukrainian World Congress. It has also supported the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Alberta Provincial Council and supported Ukrainian communities, organizations here in Alberta. We are also very grateful for the new announcement about Alberta prioritizing the assessment of applications for permanent residency made by Ukrainian nationals through the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, the AAIP program. This is a program which is a significant win for Alberta as a province and for Ukrainian nationals here in Alberta. Our community here in Alberta has welcomed thousands of Ukrainians who are fleeing the war. They're coming with their young children and their elderly parents. They need our help. They need our help here in Alberta, and they also need our help in Ukraine so that they have a home to return to. Today's announcement is very much needed and very much appreciated. Thank you, Premier Kenney, for your support. Thank you to everyone involved. It has been a real pleasure to work with your staff, your members of the public service in Alberta, and the members of your government. Дякую, слава Україні.
Thank you so much, Orissa, and you can hear the passion in her voice, and for Ukrainians here in Alberta, she truly has led much of the work and much of the vision for that. So this concludes the formal part of today's program, but I will hand it over to Justin Batinga, Premier's Press Secretary, to moderate questions from the media. Justin, it's all yours.
Thanks, Minister. For those media in person, if there are any questions, there's a media mic right back there. I don't see anyone lined up right now, so operator, could you please go to the phones?
There are no questions in the queue at this time.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes our Q&A.
I guess good news is never news. So, but before we wrap up, I do have a special presentation that I'd like to make, and this is a bit of a surprise for the recipients. Let me offer some context. Thank you very much. As you know, we just mourned the death of our late sovereign, Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who served Canada and the Commonwealth for 7 decades as our head of state, and who was part of our lives. And that is why Alberta's government created a special program to recognize her 7 decades of service through a Platinum Jubilee Medal being offered to 7,000 people who have made remarkable contributions to Canada in the spirit of Her late Majesty's service. And I want to take this opportunity with the visit to Alberta of 2 people who have made a life of service to others to recognize their exemplary spirit of public service, in particular, right now, to the people of Ukraine. So I'd like to invite President of the Ukrainian World Congress, Pavlo Ґрод, and Lieutenant General retired Rick Hillier to please step forward to receive one of the Alberta Platinum Jubilee medals. You didn't know about this, okay? I don't think the general picked this up. General? Now, the General probably has the largest rack of medals in Canada, and so this is one more that is richly deserved. And unfortunately, your home province has not done this program, so this will make up.
Okay, so thank you. Feel free to visit, share. Thank you all for coming, and have a good day.